Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and I'm here with...
Rob H. Hi, Tom. We're
Hi,
in the
Rob.
darkest timeline.
Why are you so
It's the
list...
darkest. It's the darkest timeline, Tom. It's a sad day for all of us human beings over at Greendale College. Community got canceled. For
Oh,
people who don't understand my references.
I know. I have no idea what you're talking about.
After 5 seasons and a miracle comeback of creator Dan Harmon, because he got fired and he was gone for a season, and then they brought him back, which is unprecedented in TV history. It wasn't like sometimes there's been a creator who left on their own and then came back, but he got fired and then he came back after a season.
I'm
And there was this
afraid
whole,
to ask can you tell me why in a quick and succinct manner, or no?
why he came back?
Or why he got fired?
Well, he got fired because he's incredibly difficult to work with and never turned in episodes on time.
That would
And
be a
always went
problem.
over budget. And then he came back because the star Joel McHale, the star of the show, basically said, "We won't do it unless you bring him back." So they're like, "Okay." And now they've canceled them again, and it's gone. And see, the whole thing about Community was they had this whole thing called 6 seasons in a movie, which was like a throwaway line in season 2, but it became the mantra of the show. So everyone was like, we just completed season 5, just give them 13 more episodes and do season 6. But
Nope.
it's done. It's over. And I'm very sad. And Dracula got canceled too, and that show was on. But Hannibal got renewed. I'm so happy. Yay! Hannibal's renewed.
Yeah, I saw a couple episodes. It was all right, I guess.
So that's TV
I
news.
didn't quite understand exactly what was going on, so that's. And I didn't see tonight's Marvel's Agents of Shield because I
Yes.
forgot it was on, and I didn't care. And then I also read someplace that somebody said, "Oh, you can't. We could no longer talk about Marvel's Marvel." Marvel. Is it with the S? Is have it?
Yeah, it is
Marvel's
possessive.
Agents of Shield without giving spoilers
Yes.
about the Captain America movie, and I went, "Well, that's it for me. I'm out." I don't do spoilers, dude. I try not to know anything about anything as much as possible. That's not something I should say on this podcast. I meant to say about my content that I
Oh, entertainment, yes.
entertainment.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, the TV
All right.
upfronts are happening this week. That's why there's all this TV news. So this is when they're deciding what gets renewed and picked up and canceled and stuff. So hooray, lots of TV news.
Yeah, which won't apply to me until it comes on Netflix. That's the only way I consume these things these days. Well, you can't tell by my picture quality, but my computer runs a lot better now that I downgraded to OS Lion 10.7 or whatever on my MacBook. So I am extremely happy camper. My wife is happy as well because she no longer hears me scream and curse in front of our children at my computer and threaten to throw it out or through or into traffic. Is something. I used to get very angry, but now I'm much calmer. Just so let's start off with our listeners of the week. We've got Michael this week, who was nice enough to throw us a couple dollars, and that we appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Michael.
Yes, Michael. And we have because apparently they come in waves. We've got two Steves, or we have a Steve M and a Steven R. And I will say that I can say. For sure that there are two Stevens and they spell their names differently. So this is Stephen R. You know who you are.
Thank you, Steven Squared. Thank you, both of you.
So thank you both as well for supporting the podcast. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to www.avrant.com. There's a little cup of coffee on the right-hand side. That will take you to a PayPal link where you can donate some amount of money. Anything from, I don't know, it's PayPal, so probably 5 cents up to, I don't know, $5. It probably goes higher than that. I don't know.
I'm sure you can go higher than $5. I've done so for other podcasts.
Oh, there you go. So feel free to donate whatever you think is reasonable for the help that you've gotten, if you've gotten any. And if you haven't, send us a question, which you can do via email to rob@avrant.com, tom@avrant.com. Come to the podcast's website and comment, or facebook.com/avrantpodcast. Rob is on Twitter at @FirstReflect, and I am on Twitter at @avrant_Tom. Had to think about that for a second. Sorry, it's been one of those days. I apologize. For that.
You were doing so well. It was going so smooth with all the content.
Oh, I felt very
It all
smooth about that. Yeah. I'm not drinking any beer tonight. I just got back from climbing, and sometimes I like to drink a beer after climbing, and sometimes I don't. Today I didn't bring any water when I climbed, so I was extremely thirsty when I got home, and I thought that drinking beer would have probably made this podcast go very poorly because that would have gone straight to my head. So, anything you want to address before we get straight into all of our... Well, let's talk about what topics we're going to have here. We've got update from Paul, along with some... It looks like you guys did some speaker comparisons. And,
we did.
We got and if you haven't been on Facebook, Paul posted some pictures of the AV Rant. It was on Facebook, right? Or he just emailed those to you? Oh, yeah,
yep.
So
no, I plopped some up there on Facebook, and then his own Facebook page. He has a whole bunch of photos. So.
Yeah, so he's got his street stock car with AV Rant sticker on the bumper, or right above the rear wheel well, I think. That's where it is. It looks really nice.
It does.
See, Abby's got some discussion about high-res audio, which she seems to be very interested in general. Scott has some suggestion about how to find satellites. Gary has some more questions about 2.35 to 1 content and screens, which are those extra wide screens, for those of you that don't remember last week's podcast. Steve M wanted to thank us for, is that one of the Steves from before? Yeah, that's Steve. Steve M wanted to thank us for discussing his room with a riser and the 70 Hz null, and he wants to talk a little bit more about that and has a couple of follow-up questions. Todd, one of our listeners, and I think isn't he the one that shows up at the after parties?
I think this is a different Todd. Different last
Todd.
Initial there. So.
All right, so this is Todd F, and he won from our friends over at the HT guys a KEF speaker giveaway. So he's got some new KEF speakers. He wants to know what to do with them. We're not going to say give them to us, though the thought did cross our minds. Infinite Gary's got some more comments. Is this the same Infinite? Is this different Gary?
Same Gary.
Okay. Well, you said Infinite Gary in the second one. Has some more stuff about curved OLEDs, how close you should sit, and has some calibration questions. Nick's got more talk. Oh my God, Nick's got some questions about some subwoofers that are pretty intense. Nicholas wants to know wants to say some things about acoustic treatments that we kind of to top off what we said last week, and has a recommendation. Paul this is, I don't know. Yeah, I don't care. Paul wanted to hear our thoughts on whether we think the upgraded name brands stereo systems for your car are worth the money. Michael wants a little bit more explanation about cascading crossovers. He's done some tests and wants to know what he's hearing. And then if we get to it, it seems so reasonable we were talking about before the podcast. We would definitely get to the bottom of this list, but now I'm thinking, I don't know. We will discuss the news like... I heard this Apple they're gonna buy Beats audio. Is that the headphones? That's the headphones, right?
Oh yeah, it's the headphones.
Dr. Dre must be. I mean, that guy needs any more money. He's got a record label. He discovered Eminem. I mean, amongst a bunch of other people, and he just sold Beats. He basically raped Monster Audio, which, for that, I do appreciate you. But and now he's gonna make a killing selling them $3.2 billion to Apple. Jeez. All right. So anyways, we're not gonna do that. We're not talking about that right now. Obviously. I always did, so it's done. Let's talk about Paul. So you went to go see Paul. This is Paul, the race car driver. Paul was a race car driver.
Yes.
Drove some gosh darn fast. I bought that album just for that song because it has my name in it. So anyways, go on.
Yeah, so I had a good visit. So he actually, because I still had one of those Epic Sentinel subwoofers that, I mean, they're fine, but I wasn't super enthused about it. But I had it sort of lying around, and Paul was very interested in moving his current subwoofer upstairs because he doesn't have one upstairs, and having a new subwoofer that could play even louder and lower than the one he already had in his theater. And so I sold it for a song. And so for the amount of money that I sold it, it is definitely better than anything he could have gotten.
Okay, wait, so you had an extra subwoofer. What was the subwoofer that you had?
It was the Epic Sentinel.
Epic.
Yeah.
They're
out of business now. They're closed.
Oh, okay, that's what I was thinking. Okay, so Epic was one of those internet direct brands that
they were
started off in the garage and ended in the curb. So yeah. So is it a large sub? Is it a small sub? Give us.
It is the exact same size as your Axiom EP500. So 15 inches wide, 21 inches high, and about 19 inches deep or so.
Okay, and it's a 12-inch driver or what?
12-inch driver ported, and it can definitely play very loud and very low.
Okay, and you didn't like it because it wasn't SPS?
I didn't like it because it wasn't quite as tight. It didn't have quite as fast transient response as I personally would have liked.
Okay.
So I like a tighter, more tuneful sub. But for movies, it can most definitely belt out the rumbles.
Or
In fact,
somebody who doesn't know what we're talking about is listening to this podcast going, all right, what are they talking about? You just see somebody's wife walking through the room as this is playing. Go, what are you listening to? Sorry, go on. Talk about how tight you like things, Rob.
yeah. Well, we listened to the new sub in his theater for a while, and it literally knocked some pictures askew on his wall. So
Nice.
there is no shortage of tactile output from the sub. It's no slouch in that regard. So yeah, we moved his Velodyne sub that he had. That's a 10-inch one that he had. We moved that upstairs. We've got some photos of that posted on Facebook. You can see me doing the subwoofer crawl. We put the subwoofer in Paul's favorite seat, and I am crawling around on the floor, finding the best
I
location.
hope they got they got you from a good angle, whatever your
Mhm.
best side was on that one. I have to go look. I haven't seen that. It pop up. I sometimes it's for some reason whenever Abby posts something on the Facebook page, my phone immediately beeps. But
Oh,
I'm really it's really inconsistent with everybody. I don't know if that's just that's obviously just some sort of fluke, but it just seems that way. But go on. Okay, so you got lots of output down there. He was impressed.
oh
He was
yes.
happy.
Oh yeah, yep. He's happy with that, and I was actually very, very pleased with how everything went in his upstairs room. It's a living room. He's got a pair of Kef bookshelf speakers up there, older Kef models, so they're not the concentric drivers with the tweeter buried in the middle of the woofer. These are just normal two-way speakers, but made by Kef, older ones. And so we tried some bass sweeps. We did the setup the way that I've been recommending doing it for weeks on end now. So tried some bass sweeps, and the speakers themselves, round about 100 hertz, started to get uneven or roll off, which isn't uncommon for smaller bookshelf speakers. So we didn't have the option of setting the crossover to 100 hertz. We had to go either below that at 90 or above it at 120 with the particular receiver he was using.
Yeah.
So we settled on 120, and I was actually very, very pleased with the blend that we managed to get between the speakers and the subwoofer right there. Yeah, the subwoofer ended up being, sort of in the front. I mean, he only had a limited range of space where, practically the subwoofer could live because it's a living room. You're not going to have it in the middle of the room where someone can trip over it. So yeah, the best spot out of what was available was more towards the front, quite close to the speakers themselves. And yeah, it sounds really, really nice up there. It blended really, really well. And going through the whole procedure of playing the bass sweeps, doing the subwoofer crawl, it really all works in a practical manner. And maybe one day Paul can drop by and vouch for that.
Well, if we can ever get his microphone working,
we tried. We tried. I took a look at it, and whatever is happening with the input on his Mac, the headphone part of it works fine. The microphone there's nothing. So he's just going to try and use what's built into his Mac itself.
That would probably work fine. That would probably.
It does. That functions.
Yeah. One thing you might have noticed, guys, when we were talking about this, when I found out what crossover they used was 120, the first thing I said was, "Where'd you put the subwoofer? Did you put it up front?"
Yeah.
The reason for that is the magic number for subwoofers is 80 hertz. That's the magic number. At 80 hertz is about where you stop being able to localize where the sound is coming from. Okay, so if you want your subwoofer to be at the back of your room, you need to be able to. You're really looking to cross it over at 80 hertz or lower. Okay, and that way it doesn't sound like part of the sound. You can't hear where the bass is coming from, so your ear and your mind decides, okay, wherever the sound's coming from, that's where the bass is coming from as well. Okay, or it seems to be coming from all around you if it's the real low stuff. When you cross it over as high as 120, you have to co-locate it with the speakers, hopefully, so that you can, because if not, your ear is going to go, okay, part of that sound's coming from behind me, and part of it's coming from in front of me, and that's weird. So that's why I immediately jumped to the conclusion that every time I say jump to conclusions, I think of Office Space. I'm sorry.
It's the Matt. Conclusions, Matt. All you need to do is get hit by a car and horribly injured, Tom, and you can make your own.
Tell you what, there's no shortage of people that are happy to hit me with the car. But that's it. That's why I said let's go. Why did did you co-locate it up front with your speakers, because you're going to need to. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Check that off, and head over to. Oh, but you did some more listening tests too.
Yeah. So in Paul's actual theater. Now, I mean, I would have liked to had time allowed, and we had the inclination to move everything around, which we really didn't, because we just got things nicely set up in his theater. So this wasn't a true A/B comparison where we staggered the speakers beside each other and were able to switch back instantaneously. We didn't go to all that, just didn't have time or the inclination to do so. But just temporarily set up my speakers that I have, which are some actually custom-made Ascend Acoustics Horizon speakers. Normally the Horizon is a center channel, as the name suggests, meant to lie horizontally with the tweeter above the mid-range driver and then flanked by woofers on either side. So it's a center channel design. Mine's a custom-made Horizon where it's oriented vertically and then sort of stretched out. So it almost looks like a tower, but everything's sort of in the middle, so it still needs to be on stands.
So the MTM
so you can see some pictures.
Is that basically it? It's a
Yeah, it's like a woofer on top, then the mid-range driver, then the tweeter, then a woofer below that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you can see some pictures there on Facebook. Put those up too. And so yeah, I mean, it was fun just doing the listening comparison because there was no question as to which speakers were playing. This was not one of those, oh gosh, you really have to listen for it. It was like, no, it's very obvious when you switched from his speakers to mine and then back. Definitely had different sounds to them. Now, one thing is, his speakers, the way they're positioned right now, are quite close to the corners of his room. Yeah. So it was definitely reinforcing the bass. There was absolutely no question about that. The speakers I have definitely aren't bass-shy speakers, but there was no comparison between, even when I was setting a crossover fairly high on his to try and even it out a little bit for the comparison, you couldn't get away from it. But the biggest obvious difference was actually in the treble. We were listening to some music that had quite a bit of cymbals crashing, and yeah, I mean, just hearing the extension on my speakers and how much more of a shimmer and a smash and the sound of the cymbal kind of rings out and keeps going for a little while, then decays and that. Quite different from his, which you could hear the smash of the cymbal, but then it just kind of deadened quickly. There was quite a bit of treble just simply not being played. Yeah. So that was quite easy to spot. So yeah, it was fun. Paul had a good time. He had his daughter come down momentarily, just to have her ears take a listen because she's not really into it. But yeah, he just wanted to sort of do the comparison. And it was fun. It was.
Okay, you wouldn't be able to say even my daughter could hear the difference.
And she could. She was like, "Oh yeah, it sounds crisper."
There you go. You can't say those. You can't say that in reviews anymore. By the way, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to say that in reviews.
It's too cliched.
It is too cliched. So, is he going to buy your other speakers too now? Are you selling those as well?
No. I have nothing really else to sell at the moment. Maybe there's a receiver somewhere buried in the storage somewhere. But nope, nothing else will be sold. But
I need a receiver. We should talk. Well, that's cool. It's cool. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think Paul? I mean, did he learn something? Did he have? I mean, obviously he's into this, but it's rare that you get a chance to really A/B speakers like that.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think he was a little bit surprised at how easy it was to tell them apart, because I mean when you're listening to a whole bunch of speakers, it's like you can definitely sit down and listen. I mean, he didn't choose his speakers on a whim. He listened in the store and selected the speakers that he likes, and the way they're positioned in the room, because they're closer to the corners and they're spread farther apart, they did sound more enveloping when we were playing the same music back and forth, but a lot of that is the position and not just the speakers themselves. And so he really liked the more enveloping sound, but of course that could be largely due to positioning. But he's more into the way bass sounds than treble. Being that he's been a race car driver for a long time, he has some hearing loss that he knows about.
He might not even be able to hear it, but yeah.
But he did. I mean, he did. It, there was no question he was hearing the difference in the treble too. So I mean, it was just that great experience of saying, okay, we're in our room. Everything else is the same. All the equipment is the same. Obviously, the room's the same. We're in the same seat. The only thing we're changing is the speakers, and it's a big difference. Now, I mean, this is going off on a bit of a tangent, but like if you do the same thing with amplifiers, and I'm not talking about amplifiers that have known measurable differences, but just, class A, B amplifiers, and you're comparing them to one another, you switch back and forth between those. I mean, I've done it in my room. I'm sure Tom's done it as well. It's like man, you are really listening hard to try and spot any kind of difference. With speakers, not so. With
Yep,
speakers,
not at
it's
all.
like, oh, very obvious where the change happens.
Yeah.
So,
That's why I like. That's why I love doing speaker reviews, and I love
yeah,
doing speaker comparison articles, and just comparisons in general, because you can sit there and it's fun too, because sometimes you can like both speakers, but for different
yes,
reasons, and you're like, oh,
yes.
I wish the tweeter in this one was in this other one, or I wish that mid range was over there, or something like that.
Yeah,
You know, you can really find that can be the case. So,
yeah.
anyways, enough about that. All right, let's talk
Yes.
about Abby. So we're going. I'm going in order again. So Abby linked this up, I guess, over at Facebook, right?
Yep.
To a post by Scott Wilkinson, who's a podcaster and other things. Anyways, is that over at the AVS? That was the AVS forum, huh?
Yep, it is. Yeah, he's sort of administering the AVS forum now. He's like
He
the head
is the
honcho
editor
over
in
there.
chief or something now.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Anyways, he which is good. That makes me like that place more. Anyways, he had a very long post about high-res audio, including a nice explanation at the beginning on how digital audio works, which we will link up to you, or Rob will at least, in the show, Facebook show post stuff. So that will be a thing that will be happening. So if you're really interested in how, see that it was, the name of the article is high resolution audio irrelevant, and he did not have a conclusion paragraph, and it sort of drove me nuts on that one. I think he did that for political reasons, but what he
Yeah.
basically did was talked about what some of the other people are talking about and sort of summarized it, which is a really good thing to do. You're going to recognize, if you've been paying attention to this podcast, you're going to recognize a lot of what they're saying as things that Rob and I have both said. And the question is do we need anything more than CD quality? Some people say yes, some people say no, but I think the consensus universally, I think everybody agrees that during the recording process,
Hmm.
you do,
Oh yes.
because you're going to be making changes to the music after the recording, and that's going to introduce noise, which you have to get rid of, when you down converted, or you down res it to a CD quality. Even if you're at 120, was it 192 kilohertz? Was it? I think that 32 bits the highest we really have. Right? Is that
Not
right? Is
that
it
anything
32?
can capture at that resolution, but it
Yeah.
can genuinely capture.
Yeah. So, anyways, but that even if you're capturing it, that high, there's all sorts of stuff that you can be possibly doing to the music, in the post-production process, which I'm sure Abby could attest to, since she's a recording engineer along with other things, and she, that will introduce noise and other things that you want to make sure that you can get rid of as you're converting it down to even if you're just going down to CD quality, or if you're going to do something like SACD or DVD or even Blu-ray, which I guess was a Blu-ray. Is it Blu-ray 9624? Is that what it is, or it can be?
Well, I mean, Blu-ray could be 192/24 in stereo in two channel.
Yeah, yeah.
It could go that high, but yeah, for full surround sound, it'll be 96 kilohertz sampling rate, 24-bit audio. If they decide to go there,
Yeah.
up to 7.1 channels.
One thing I found interesting was that people were complaining about the file sizes on HD tracks, indicating that perhaps what they've done is taken a CD quality track and upconverted it
Yes.
to the higher quality bit rate, and then selling it for more, which does nothing for you. Does absolutely nothing for you. It will it will not do it. So that's one thing to be concerned about. If you read the article, because the article is very good. I wish he would have actually answered the "is high resolution audio irrelevant" question, because I would love to hear his take on that. But I don't know.
Well, what's your opinion, Tom? Why don't you answer it for yourself, and then I will.
Well, I can see the point of a slightly higher bit depth. I can see that, but I really don't think. I mean, especially if you look at all the factors that go into it, the dynamic range, how much we can actually hear, all that. I if someone were to come to me and say, here's all the math, and I can prove to you that CD quality is good enough, I would believe them. And if somebody said, but if somebody said, here's why we should bump from 16 to 20 bit, I would believe them.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody says we should go to 96, I would not believe that person. 96 kilohertz. Basically, I just don't think that. I think we need it, but I don't think that. I think we need it for the recording process, but I don't think we need it for playback. For playback, I don't think we need it. And I especially don't agree with the people that think that we need that greater amount of range so that we can capture and reproduce what they sometimes call ultrasonics, something above the level of human hearing, which they say by the virtue of being in the air at the same time interacts with lower harmonics and then changes the sound slightly. I don't buy that as being something that actually happens. And even if we had every piece of our audio chain, which we do not right now, very few people do, being able to reproduce those ultrasonic frequencies, which we don't. Your DACs might not do it. Your speakers certainly, unless you spend a bunch, generally can't do it. Or you put one of those
Your amp might not. Not all amps are linear all the way up there.
That's true. Not though many of them, especially the ABs, many of them are, but some might not be. I mean, your source might not be able to reproduce it or pass it along. So if any part of that can't do it, then it's gone. It's just flat gone. But even if you could do it, I honestly don't think, first of all, it's going to make an audible difference. And any audible difference it could make would be created by distortion that would be audible. Okay? Because reproducing something at 50 kilohertz, while a nice thought, anything audible you're going to hear, I think, is going to be distortion from something trying to do something at 50 kilohertz, which would be pretty hard to do. What do you think, Rob? That's my take.
My take is I don't think there's any need for the higher sampling rate. I agree with you in theory about the greater bit depth because that is a greater dynamic range, but honestly, do we want anything playing 140 decibels? No.
No.
That would easily make you deaf if it played for any length of time. So why do we need it? I mean, regular 16-bit audio on CDs has a dynamic range of 96 decibels. But that's 96 decibels in range, right? That's not, it's starting at 0 and can only go as loud as 96. You can go up to 120, and then you'll just have a noise floor below that. But if anything's playing at 120, you're not going to hear something that's playing at 26 dB or 36 dB, right? It'll be completely masked by the thing that's playing 120. So in theory, fine, we can have a greater dynamic range, but music just doesn't have that much dynamic range to it. You're not going from 0 to 120 the same moment.
I think my favorite discussion part of that article was when they talked about when you're recording something live, you're like, oh, well, from quiet to whatever might be 120 decibels. Like, yeah, when you're recording something live, there's people in the room and they don't shut up. Okay, and so you might be lucky to get 70 dB of dynamic range. That means from as quiet as it gets in that room to as loud as it gets in that room is 70 dB total. Yeah. That easily fits within CD quality.
They're not recording in an anechoic chamber. Even a studio that's nicely padded and acoustically treated and is quiet and all that still has a noise floor somewhere in the 20 decibel range. There's still just naturally a noise floor to the world. So I mean, in theory, yes, but I mean, then you get to the whole thing where the final CD has all of 1 decibel of dynamic range anyway, so who the heck cares where that happened to be? You just maxed it out. I mean, that's the bigger problem, and that isn't a format problem. That's a mastering decision. That had nothing to do with the format itself. But my ultimate thing is this. Whatever the final product is, whatever the final master is that they end up with, where everyone who's involved with it says, yup, we're happy with that, that's the thing, make all the other versions, all the other copies that we're going to sell from that master. Just give me that master. That's all I want. To me, the rest of it is irrelevant. Just don't downsample it, don't data compress it, don't do anything to it. Just give me the master. And I have to credit, this whole Pono project and places like iTracks and that. That is what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, just give us the highest quality thing, the final master, and just put it out there unadulterated.
And
Make
just
no
realize it might
alterations
be
to it.
crap. Okay.
Yeah,
just
it could
because
be.
it's a high bit rate, or it's
Yeah, it could still be poorly mastered.
it could be, yeah, it could, exactly, and that's what it really comes down to. And I think that that's the ultimate point we should take away from this whole push to HD quality. Now, I think that having high res audio formats out there forces the engineers in some way to think, I have to create something that's better than just what I would put on a CD, or better than what I'm going to put on iTunes. So if that happens because we start using 9624, then okay, I'm all for 9624 if that's what it takes to get you people to do a decent job with your music.
Yeah.
Lazy, highly compressed bums. But it doesn't need to be that way. It absolutely doesn't. CD is good enough. I really believe that. I could make the case for 20 bits, but really, CD is good enough. I think that what we
just
really
master
need
it well, and we'll all be happier.
Yes. All right, let's go on.
Yeah, let's
We're
go.
on to quick questions and updates. Scott doesn't have an initial after his name, so he's just one of the many. Suggested, send us an email, suggested using a Sat Finder app for either Android or iPhone to help us locate broadcast satellites in the sky. He's used it himself. It's one of those things, I think, where you point your phone at the sky, right?
Yeah, you can actually point it up there with your camera, and it uses your GPS location, and actually looking at the sky through your camera, and it overlays in augmented reality and says, hey, there should be a satellite up there. Aim your dish that away.
So Scott says he's used them and they work, and Rob says...
I say I just typed SatFinder into the App Store for iPhone, and there's like a dozen of them. So I don't know which one is the good one, and reading reviews on the App Store is completely useless. It's as bad as reading reviews on Amazon, because somebody will say, this is the greatest thing ever, and then somebody else will say, it's completely broken and it's 1 star. So yes, Scott, if you or anyone else who's used one of these SatFinder apps could let me know which one in particular, perhaps by the maker of it. So that would be very helpful, and I will link to it once I know.
Yeah, Rob's going to be at Paul's house so often he's going to start make you up a little room in the back. That's Rob's room. Let's see, Gary.
Yes.
Was a little confused by Rob's description of the ideal of your ideal.
My ideal, yes.
Not mine, which was a fixed screen with removable panels. Your ideal 2-screen setup for 2.35 to 1 content. 2.35 is ultra widescreen. Okay, so it's not 16 by 9. It's 2.35 to 1. It's wider. Okay, ultra widescreen I don't think is an actual thing. That's what I call it.
CinemaScope.
CinemaScope. There you go. Yeah. Gary has a 16 by 9 flat panel on the wall, and then a 2.35 to 1 motorized screen that can drop down in front of it. So is that what Rob was describing?
Yes and no. The yes part of that is I mentioned the Elite Screens Osprey. They actually aren't making it under that name anymore. They've moved it to their Elite Prime Vision division of their company, which actually only sells through retailers and installers. So you can't find the Prime Vision products through online retailers. So they've delineated themselves that way. But they have one there called the Peregrine Twin. Yeah, try saying that 5 times fast. But that's what it's called now. So that screen, which I did describe, is a 16 by 9 screen, and then a 2.35 to 1 screen that comes down in front of it. So that one is a 2 screen, so this is not a flat panel setup. This is where you're using a projector for both aspect ratios. And so it has the 16 by 9 and then a wider 2.35 to 1 that can come down in front of it. So that is the yes part of the answer. But my actual ideal, which I didn't do a very good job of describing, is 2 16 by 9 screens. Because...
What?
Yeah. Yeah, because I like the idea of having one 16 by 9 screen that is the right size for HD TV content. For me, that would fill about a 32-degree field of view. So that could be a flat panel if I'm sitting close enough, or if I'm sitting really far away, it'll need to be a projection screen, but I have this one 16 by 9 screen that is for HD TV content, and then I want a way bigger 16 by 9 screen that can come down in front of it, which will be, let me try to explain it, the same width as what a 2.35 to 1 screen would have been, but then also taller. So it's still 16 by 9. That's my ideal. And the reason I do that is because I'm crazy enough to care about movies like The Dark Knight or Mission Impossible 4 or Tron that have IMAX sequences in them. So part of that movie is 2.35 to 1. I want that to be wider than HD TV, but then part of it is an IMAX, which fills the full 16 by 9 frame, and I want to see all of that too. I don't want any of that image projected above or below the physical screen and me not being able to see.
So you're not going to have you're going to have black bars on your bigger.
Yes.
Is that right? You're going to have black bars.
Yeah, I would have black bars being projected by the projector onto the big 16 by 9 screen that would come down in front, and I'm okay with that. To me it's a minor sacrifice, because if you're getting a really good projector like one of the JVCs or something like that, those black bars are really, really black. So it depends on having also.
I'm going to go out of the limb and say that's crazy. I won't. Yeah. That's crazy.
I know I'm crazy.
That's okay, as long as we're all on board with that.
That is my ideal.
Yeah, that's a weird idea. I thought you were going to have a 2.35 to 1 drop down in front of a 16 by 9. Well,
if I want to get really crazy, my absolute ideal would be a huge 16 by 9 screen with 4-way masking, because then the 4-way masking could make it any size I wanted and could, mask off.
That's not crazy. Whatever. That I actually agree with.
But those are super expensive.
Yeah, so. Well, that's why we didn't recommend it, because we're not. Yeah, I don't think we're that podcast yet.
The 4-way motorized masking is super
Let
expensive.
us know, and then we will recommend things specifically just for you. No, we don't have that much money.
Two 16 by 9
screens. Pay somebody to come in and just put up a new screen every time you want to change it.
Two 16 by 9 screens doesn't have to be that expensive, surprisingly. I mean, it's obviously more expensive than one screen, but there are some pretty affordable 16 by 9 screens. Drop down, acoustically transparent.
So you're talking about physically two, not in the same case or anything, but just two
actual
different screens.
Yeah. Both of them 16 by 9.
We have to all remember that Rob's got 11 speakers pointed at his head.
Yeah.
All right, everybody has to remember that. All right, let's just put that out there now so we don't forget. All right, on a related note, Gary finds the spillage of the projected black bars, or even some picture content, like with the Dark Knight, because he's got a 2.35 to 1. So, like, we're talking about the Dark Knight, it's mostly in the CinemaScope, the 2.35 to 1. Okay, but there's a couple of scenes that are in IMAX, which are 16.9. These particular scenes are in 16.9. Okay, he doesn't find that spillage when it shoots a little bit too high or too low. As it overshoots the top and the bottom, he doesn't find that spillage to be a non-issue. He used to have an anamorphic lens. He doesn't use it anymore. His projector just zoomed in to fill in the width of the 2.35 to 1 screen, which is, hey, good for you, Gary.
So, his setup, it is that wider screen. It is, on occasion, projecting above and below the screen. The black bars are most definitely projecting above and below the screen. For him, it's not a problem. He's got a blacked out front part of his theater, so it's not an issue for him. But if you had, I don't know, lighter walls or something above and below your screen, it might look kind of weird on something that switches to IMAX and then switches back. So, there's no perfect solution except a very expensive 4-way masking screen. And I can't hear Tom, so I'm not sure if he's muted himself.
I muted myself. Sorry
oh my God, it happened. It's reciprocal. We've both done it now.
I had to scratch my ear. I took off my headphones to do it. Sorry. This reminds me of the what's that gloss? Whenever people go to buy glossy, the gloss black speakers, and they start worrying about whether or not they're going to reflect light from their display. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you are never. Yes, it will. You will never notice it. You certainly will. Unless you are an insane person, and I mean that in the most general sense. I mean, I'm not saying that if it does bother you that you are actually crazy. I mean, you're just crazy about AV more so than I am, because I've had glossy speakers for the longest time, and I have noticed. I look over and go, "Oh, look at! I can see a reflection in the speaker," and I go back to watching my movie, and I never think about it again. It is a not. It's one of those things that ends up being a non-issue. Yes, when you're perseverating on something beforehand, this stuff will drive you nuts. You're like, oh, but what if this and that, and what if this thing doesn't match that, and like, oh god, my dad was talking about how he wants to have all of his because they bought a house here and they're redoing the kitchen amongst some other improvements, but they're redoing the kitchen before they move in, and he's like, I want all the stuff to match. I'm like, oh god. You are never going to care. As long as it's the same color, you're never going to care. You're never going to think, oh, thank God that that's a Sony, refrigerator or Samsung refrigerator and a Samsung dishwasher and a Samsung. Just don't worry about it. Anyways, but this ends up being a non-issue. Steve M. wanted to thank us for discussing his room. This is the one with the riser. Now, to remind everybody, he had a 70 hertz null problem. He's also got 2 rows of seats. For reasons that we have described a couple times in the podcast, and we're not going to go over, we thought that the riser was the issue. Okay, the riser we thought was resonating and creating a problem sonically in his room. He's been very busy the past few weeks. Hey, dude, it happens to the best of us. So he hasn't been able to adjust the things and remeasure just yet, but he will, and he's looking forward to trying all of our recommendations. Yay! Okay, first of all, he didn't actually know about. Okay, so he uses Room EQ Wizard. It's a free program. You need a microphone and some way of getting it into your computer. So you need a microphone, a preamp usually, to get it into your computer, the sound into your computer. You can use this free program called Room EQ Wizard to measure your room. So he did not realize that we informed him that Radio Shack, the Radio Shack meter, which he uses as a microphone, which you can use. It has a little plug on the side. That it has correction curves built into the Room EQ Wizard. So he's gonna use those. He says it might be a measurement. Maybe the 70 hertz is a measurement error. It's not. I mean, unless the curves are different than I remember them being, they're like a dB or 2 here or there. It's not like.
Well, some of them were like 8 or 9 dB in certain, but not at like 70 to 80 in that range.
No.
Yeah, so it shouldn't. If you're seeing a big null on your measurement at 70 to 75 hertz, that shouldn't just be measurement error, but it could be part of it. So
I mean, it could be a contributing factor, but that's not going to be that.
It certainly doesn't hurt to turn on the correction curve that's built into REW. So
I'm the one who's supposed to flub my speaking.
I know.
Okay. Second of all, he did try moving. Okay, so one of our recommendations, or Rob's recommendations in particular, was that he had 2 subwoofers that were facing each other. One in the front of the room, one in the back of the room, but they were both on the same side of the room, so they were a little off center. And they were both on the same side of the room off-center. So Rob suggested that he take one and move it to the other side of the room off-center so that they were a mirror, well, really a mirror image, but they were, opposite.
Diagonally across from each other.
Diagonally across from each other. So he has done that.
Mm-hmm.
He says he's done that.
Yep.
But without measurements, he's not sure how much a difference it's made.
Yes. So here's the thing.
Have you played a sweep?
Yes.
Let's start with that. Before we say anything else, did you just turn on some music? Because you might not have noticed with that. But did you play a sweep before and after?
Yeah. Because measurements are lovely. They're fun to play around with. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, you have to measure. But ultimately, what you hear is more important than what the measurements tell you. I mean, that's what we have speakers and subwoofers for, is to listen to them, not to look at them on a graph that was, produced by a free piece of software and a microphone. So play some bass sweeps because, I mean, first of all, like we're saying, we think that 70 hertz is probably real. We think it's probably being caused by the riser, if it's anything. But if you don't hear a null at 70 or 75 hertz, then effectively it isn't there. It doesn't matter what the measurements tell you. If you don't hear it when you play a sweep, then that's really all that matters. And if you do hear it when both subwoofers are offset to one side of the room together, but then when you switch them and have them diagonally opposite, and the null goes away or at least gets improved a whole bunch, well, then that's the difference. I mean, it really doesn't matter what the measurements tell you. Trust your ears on things like that. The sweep will let you know.
Yeah, yeah. So play a sweep, dude, and don't worry about getting out your little mic. Okay. Third of all, he's a little confused because we said to try and get his frequency response as flat as possible. This is not him. I thought we were talking about somebody different. Anyways, including using the EQ built into his subwoofers before running any room correction program. Okay. But then last podcast we said to run the room correction first before using any outboard EQ. So which is it? Now, we were talking to two different people. For sure here, because now I'm remembering this. Okay, in your case, you've got a big suck out at 70 hertz. So you want to get your room as good as possible before you use your room correction, because your room correction can only do so much. Okay, your room correction can only fix so much. And the best, if you place your speakers as well as you possibly can, you put your subwoofers in the best possible place, you put some room treatments in there to kind of even out the room as best you can. If you do all that and then run Odyssey or YPow or MCACC or whichever one you're using, whatever the new one is from Onkyo, I don't know what it's called, or the Trinov one or whatever it is from the other guys. Or the Arc. Arc is one too, right?
Yep.
Whichever one you're using, it can only do so much. So the better thing you can get, better your room is before it starts, the better it will work to fine tune it. Okay. But last week we were talking to somebody different who wanted to have a specific sound in his lower end. Okay. This means he wanted to have what he called, and I think is a very good term, house curve. He wanted a house curve for his low end. You can think of this as the bass knob in your car, okay?
Yeah, his goal was not flat. He did not want linear flat frequency response. He wanted something else. He wanted a hump in there somewhere to just emphasize certain bass frequencies.
And there
personal
is
taste, which is fine.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. He has decided that's what he wanted, and so what we said at that point was, hey, if you want to have a house curve, or if you want to change it from non-linear, then get it as linear as possible first before you add your EQ on. Don't add the EQ at the beginning, your house curve at the beginning, then run Odyssey, which is just going to do its best to try to fix that thing, because it's not linear. So you don't want those things to be competing. Okay, so you run everything else first, then do the EQ. That this time we're talking about an outboard EQ. We're not talking about Odyssey or something that's part of your receiver. We're talking about, an outboard separate box. Okay, so he was using the SMS1, which is a Velodyne, I think no longer made thing. So I think I think Velodyne mostly just makes headphones these days. I don't really know what's going on over. I actually had a discussion with, I don't remember, I think it was Clint, about like what happened at Velodyne. Apparently it's like a Days of Our Lives sort of thing. It's a real weird situation. That's why they went from making great subwoofers to kind of sort of not making anything anymore. I don't know what they're doing. Anyway, so one of these days I'll get the full 411 on that and I'll report to you. Now, did we cover that one enough? I think we did, right?
I believe so.
Number 4. This is the last one from Steve M. An important correction. Rob wait a second. Should you read this, or should I read this?
Well, sure. I may as well explain it. I have made a very similar, if not the exact same, very similar mistake before. Damon corrected me back then. Steve has corrected me now. I misspoke. I was describing octaves, what they are, a doubling of frequency. And somewhere in there, while I was speaking very quickly, I said that there are, I think I said more frequencies between 1,000 and 2,000 than there are from 20 to 40. That is technically incorrect. There are an infinite number of frequencies between any two hertz that you might mention. It can go on for an infinite number of decimal places. Frequencies aren't only integers or down to only 0.1 or something. There can be an infinite number of frequencies between 20 hertz and 40 hertz, an infinite number between 1,000 and 2,000. I was just trying to get across that the number 2,000 seems like it's a lot farther away from the number 1,000 than the number 40 sounds like it's far away from the number 20. If you're only counting integers, 2,000 is 1,000 away from 1,000. 40 is only 20 away from 20. But all I was trying to do is get across that as far as octaves are concerned, it's just doubling. That's all that matters. Doesn't matter what the numbers are, as long as one is double the other one or half of the other one, that is an octave. So misspoke there. Thank you for the correction, and I hope that makes a little more sense now.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yes, I had to make sure that my mic was on. I turned it off again because I somehow hooked my mic into the mic cable, so I had to readjust everything. All right.
Good job.
Thank you. All right, questions from last week. Woo! We're almost into this week. Todd F.
Yes.
Congratulations to Todd. He was one of the winners of one. They had more than one?
They had 3. They
Wow.
were giving away 3 different KEF systems of varying price points. He got the middle one.
Ah, okay. So he got the T series, which are flat tower-ish like things.
Oh, they're just flat. They are very, very flat. Pretty much meant to be wall-mounted. They're like 1.5 or 2 inches thick. So they're meant to be super skinny flat panels. They're meant to complement those.
Yeah, I've seen these. I've seen these before. They are. They were at Cedia when I was there. Mm-hmm. They are very flat. They kind of curve or something weird like that. They were very excited about them when I saw them. I'm not saying I can say nothing other than that. You can't really hear them on a. I mean, I could hear that they play sound, but you at a Cedia, it's like God, there could not be a worse place to listen to stuff. All right, so he's already got a Denon X2000. Good receiver. PB12 NSD, good subwoofer. Andrew, the Pioneer Andrew Jones front and center speakers, which he obviously got on. I would assume he got on your recommendation, and some Onkyo home theater in a box speakers as his surrounds, in a 26 by 18 foot. That is a big hunkin' room, dude.
That's a big room.
26 by 18 foot room. I imagine it probably has vaulted ceilings because it's probably one of those living room, great room type things.
Yeah.
He's wondering if the KEF T series speakers he just won will be an improvement over any of the speakers in the systems, or should he just keep using what he has? I found this to be an odd question because you have them, listen to them, and then you tell me which ones are better. But yeah, I guess there's a reason for this?
Well, I think the thought is if he isn't going to keep them, he's probably going to sell them, and if he's going to sell them, they are worth more if they're sealed in the box rather than having to say, hey, I opened these up and calling them used or new other on eBay or something along those lines. Things are usually worth more if you can say sealed in the box. So I think that's why he doesn't want to just crack them open and have a listen for himself.
So this is a 5.1 system? Is that what you got?
It is, yes. It's a 5.1 package of these T-Series speakers with a little subwoofer. So I can tell you right away, the little subwoofer in the KEF package is not up to your SVS PB12 NSD. That one's easy. Your subwoofer that you already have is better. Full stop. That one's done.
That doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep it around, though. I mean, right. If you have an office, it probably would work very well in there. Like I said, I haven't heard them. I doubt they're going to be able to fill that room with thunderous sound. I don't. The Andrew Jones, do they put out a lot of output? I thought they weren't the most powerful.
I mean the Andrew Jones are solid. The towers can play pretty darn loud. They are not the most efficient speakers in the world, but they're certainly not the least efficient either. I mean, I've only heard the T-Series speakers in a demo in a store, so that is not anything to base a great opinion on. I was very impressed with them in that store demo because they're so incredibly skinny. I mean, I've listened to a lot of on-wall speakers because I was searching for on-wall speakers at one point, and almost all of them sound horrible. And these T-Series speakers, they really impressed me. I thought they sounded very good for what they are. But regardless of whatever technology, and they tout their technology and they're proud of it, and I don't blame them for being proud of it, it's cool that you can have speakers that skinny that do genuinely sound pretty darn good, but they can't play below 120 hertz. They are super duper skinny. I mean, just think about how far can the drivers actually move. Yeah. If you're only an inch thick, you're not going to have 2-inch excursion. I mean, it's just not possible. So they're limited.
Big enough surround on those things, I guess. The excursion would only be out.
and any of the reviews I could find for the T-Series all describe them as being great for a small to medium-sized room, which all makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You do not have a small to medium-sized room.
That doesn't mean
So
you don't have a small to medium-sized room that could use some speakers, though.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and these are very good-looking speakers. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're really good looking. Yeah.
yeah, I'm hesitant to give you any sort of push towards selling them, to be honest with you, because I think that in the long run you might end up regretting them. These are going to be the kind of speakers that later on, when you have a
Yes.
better, they'd be great for surrounds.
Yeah.
I imagine that they would be just fine. So first, I don't know how they would match with the Andrew Jones speakers
Yeah.
or whatever speakers you might have in the future. But you have Onkyo home theater in a box speakers as a backs right now. They're certainly going to do better than that. That would be my guess, not
Yeah.
knowing which home theater in a box that you have. Uh, I would also think of them as a way of getting a Zone 2 going.
Sure.
That would be, or even distributed audio through your house. You're going to have 5 speakers. You can kind of place them around in a room and just go wire them all for mono to come out of something. And, it might sound pretty good. I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't think that in your room I would switch out your speakers for these speakers, though I will say, certainly not the sub, but I will say that if you took all your speakers out and put these speakers in your 5.1 configuration, wall mounted and everything the way they're supposed to be, it could be that you would be very happy with them. I don't know. It all depends on how loud you listen to stuff. What you really care about as far as sonically, and how well they match your ears and your room. It's really hard to say, dude. But output wise alone,
Yeah.
I would not have recommended this type of speaker for that size of room.
That's right. Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't have recommended a subwoofer, that's for sure. That we did not help Todd.
I don't know. Yeah, I hope that's of some help. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Let's move along quickly.
There would be absolutely no way that if those were my speakers, if I had won them, there'd be no way that I wouldn't have that box open right away to ABM with the Andrew Jones. That would be the first thing I would do.
I mean, hey, even if you make a little bit less selling them than you would have if you kept them sealed, you still got them for free. So
you gotta listen to them, dude. You gotta give them a chance, and because who knows, it might be exactly what you want. I don't know. And think how cool they would look if they were on the wall next to your flat panel or your projector screen. All right, Gary, Infinite Gary. Infinite Gary's got an infinite baffle subwoofer, which in a dedicated home theater with very cool ceiling and everything else. We haven't heard from him for a bit, I don't think. So,
I've been talking to him a whole bunch. He's been very happy. He's been playing some Master and Commander pretty much at full reference volume, and scared himself and anybody else who was in the room at the same time.
What did he do with his subs? Okay, so the last thing I remember talking about with him was that he had some subs that he was happy or wasn't happy with or something. Did he do the thing where he did he measured the infinite baffle by itself and then
I haven't heard anything on that front from him, so I don't think any changes have been made, to be honest.
Well, as long as he's happy, I don't really care.
Yeah.
All right. So he sent us a link to an article at flatpanelhd.com. I have flat panels with an S, hd.com, that explains in detail why curved screens are a bad idea, which it's a good article. It's got lots of pictures.
It's very in depth. It really lays it out there.
They talk about angles and viewing angles and stuff like that, but you really just have to think about it and the fact that you're not sitting close enough to a curved screen at home to make it worth your while to curve a screen. But they go into the science behind it, so you should definitely check that out.
Yeah, for once, I can be the one saying that they went too long and I could make it a lot shorter. Look at it. It's distorted. The end.
Yeah, that's really pretty much it. You are not sitting close enough to have this wrap around you. That's all there is to it.
Just turned a rectangle into a thing with curves on the top and bottom, and it's supposed to be a rectangle. Therefore, don't do that. The end.
The end. Why do you think we went from the convex screens of CRTs to flat panels? Why do you think everybody was so excited about that? No more distortion. There you go. Right there. Done.
Yeah.
Gary was also curious about the mention of THX recommendation of 40-degree field of view. Yeah, the THX one is a little bit on the high side. The SMPTE one is more reasonable, right? Isn't it? The
There's a
THX is quite
30.
close.
Yeah. SMPTE is 30. That's the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers.
Yeah,
For HDTV, they recommend a 30-degree field of view. THX recommends a 40. At the top, I mean, THX actually recommends a range.
yeah,
So
yeah,
40
yeah,
is the largest they
yeah.
recommend.
So that's about 5'6", so 5.5 feet away from a 55-inch display. That sounds about right to me, dude. Regardless of resolution, Gary finds that uncomfortably close, and his calibrator said that you might see things at that distance that you would not supposed to see. So is that the THX recommendation only for projection? No, that's their recommendation for everything. Doesn't make any difference. That's their recommendation. But remember, they do have a range.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about. But the key here, regardless of what you if you go with 30 degrees or 40 degrees, is in most homes you're looking at like 12. If you're lucky, people sit so far away from
Yeah.
their screens, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. People sit 12 feet away from a 50-inch screen. So
Oh, and they're like,
you're not even remotely close to either recommendation.
no, no. So, yes, okay, you're right. 40 degrees might be way too much for you, but I guarantee you that for most people, that when you walk into their home and they're watching something, you're like, it's like looking through a window on an airplane, but from like across the airplane. You know what I mean? From like the seats on the other side. That's what it feels like. You know? And I'm just always flabbergasted when I see people. So his calibrator says that you might not, you might at that distance you might see things you're not supposed to see. What he's talking about is pixels.
Yep.
You sit that close, you might see pixels, or you might see screen door effect, or you might see, or more likely to see screen door effect, or more likely to see it was the DLP, the rainbow effect, right? That DLPs used
I
to
don't know
have.
if sitting closer makes you see rainbows anymore, but
No, I don't
it's
think
mostly a
so. I
pixel
never
thing.
saw rainbows, dude. Even when projectors I did it, I was never able to see it. I have perfect vision. I've been tested multiple times across my life. Got
It has
no
nothing to do with
problems.
acuity. It's all about how
I'm not.
particular cones in your brain work.
I know. I just have never been able to see it. Screen door I've seen, but
Yeah.
not the rainbow effect. But so yes, it is possible that sitting so close would make it more possible for you to see pixels. But at all of these recommendations, 1080p should be indistinguishable. You should not see pixels at these
Yeah, I mean,
fields of view.
if you have perfect visual acuity based on the ideal of how far apart the light sensors in your eye should be and all that, supposedly a 32-degree field of view when you're looking at HD resolution, so 1920 pixels going across. If that's what you're looking at, supposedly 32 degrees is exactly where one pixel should be the same width as one photoreceptor in your eye if you have perfect 20/20 vision and blah blah blah. I mean, ultimately, most projectors that are projecting a big large image, like the Panasonics, the Epsons, the JVCs, all that, they kind of blur the pixels a little tiny bit, so you can sit closer without seeing screen door effect, without seeing individual pixels. So yeah, I mean, really the thing is, some people go into a movie theater and they like to sit quite close. I don't know anybody who actually likes to sit in the front row, but
God,
some
I've
people
done that.
like
It's
to sit
awful.
quite close. Some people like to sit at the very back. And theater didn't change, screen size didn't change. That's just people's preference. That's where they would choose to sit if they had their druthers. So, for Tom, he might like to sit closer than Gary does. I might like to sit somewhere in the middle. That's fine. There's no right or wrong with that. That's
I,
why
s-
THX gives a range.
I sit about a third back from the back wall, a third in from the back wall. Excuse me. Sometimes I'll sit a little bit closer than that. It just kind of depends.
Yeah.
But at home, I think I sit closer at home than I do. I
Hmm.
mean, I think the screen size is. I don't sit closer. I sit a third in from the back wall. But I
Yeah.
think the screen size is bigger at home than it is in the movie theater. Uh, I don't think I sit as close. Mostly because I'm more worried about sound at the movie theater, and I feel like that's where the sound is the best. I'm sorry, dude. It's all about sound. I don't care about that picture. All right. Okay. Gary's having his display professionally calibrated. He's had the calibrator back a few times, but that guy must love you. The first time he found that the final result a bit too bright for his liking overall. I think that's pretty unusual, Gary.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
Gary described he tends to like a little bit dimmer image. That's just what he likes. So,
yeah. You are unique because most people don't. Most people like it a little bit brighter. But I think you're better off because
mhm.
I think if as Rob likes to say, if people had their druthers, they would have a much brighter image than they really need, and they would end up with headaches. So having it a little bit dimmer, I think, is better. So he had the calibrator come back and lowered the overall light output, but then the image looked a bit too purple, a bit too purple, especially blue.
Yeah, like the color blue looked a little bit purplish tinged.
Oh, okay, okay.
But
But
everything overall looked a little too purpley.
off. Okay, so the
Yeah.
calibrator is coming back a third time because apparently lowering the overall light output also threw off the colors. I would ask how long he was there that second time, because if he just lowered because you can do that with
Yeah.
projectors, you can just lower the light
Well,
output.
this was a flat panel too that he was having done, so he had a
Oh,
couple
I
of
thought
things
this was
going
a
on.
projector. This is not a projector.
He's got that as well. He's got a projector and a flat panel. So,
Oh, so which one is the one that he's having a problem with how bright it is?
the flat panel.
Oh, okay, all
Yeah.
right. All right. So Gary's not upset, but he's really kind of wondering why this is the case. So what's the deal? Why is it taking multiple calibrations to get it spot on? Because you know what you like, and you're not getting it. That's why. It's pretty obvious to me. Yeah.
I mean, this is. I mean, Gary's fine with it. He sort of knows what's up. But this is more for anyone else who might be listening. And we've talked about, you know, ultimately, if you don't want to go through the thing of buying a light meter and learning how to use the CalMan software or SpectraCal or what is the other one, ChromaPure, whatever one of these softwares that you have to purchase, if you don't want to go through all that, we've recommended spend the same amount of money or less and hire a professional, of someone from ISF or someone from THX certification who is certified and a professional calibrator to come in and calibrate your display. And someone hearing this might go, but they didn't get it right the first time, and I might have to pay more money to have them come back and do it again. Now, almost all calibrators I've ever known, they pretty much say, hey, if you're not happy with it, we'll come back at least once to get it right. Or
Yeah.
a lot of them
Twice.
will throw in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Twice seems excessive. But
a lot of them will throw in they'll say, oh yeah, we'll come back in a year or something like that, just for a checkup or something like that. Not everybody will, but a lot of calibrators will offer that kind of thing. And it's because, yes, you can be a professional, you can be totally trained, you might even pass the entire questionnaire that Michael Chen has on his website. You might know all the technical stuff and still end up with an image that either A, is slightly inaccurate because of some little thing that was missed, or just isn't to the client's liking, which might mean that it was accurate, but you just don't like accurate, which is fine.
no.
You're allowed to not like 100% accurate.
When you're paying money, if you like all your people to look like Oompa Loompas, they should look like Oompa Loompas. That's just the way it goes. And however bad the calibrator thinks it looks, makes no difference. So they're going to come in and they're going to do a calibration. Now, there's two different modes of thinking in video calibration. Audio calibration tends to be a little bit easier, I think. But video calibration, everybody thinks they know what they want. Okay, so when you see somebody change stuff and all of a sudden colors look different, different is automatically perceived as bad by people, so they get really stressed out. So some calibrators ask, saying, "Hey, go off and why don't you go do your stuff, and I'll work on this for a bit, and I'll call you when it's done." So they bring you in afterwards and they show you some stuff and let you get used to it, and then you say, yeah, it's good, or well, I guess it's good, and then you end up calling them back, okay? But a lot of the THX guys are trained, and the suggestion is to sit there and say, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, let's do it together. Does this look better to you? Does it not? Blah, blah, blah. So that the client has not only the understanding of what was done and values that how much effort and what the technology behind it was, but it now has buy-in to saying, yes, this picture is one that I was there every step of the way calibrating, so therefore it must be right. So Gary, if like I said, different calibrators operate in different ways. The one's not any more right, but I tend to think, like when I'm doing it at somebody's house, I wait till they leave the room and I do it without them knowing because I don't want to go through the whole rigmarole of them telling me why it is that dynamic is the best, because it's not, and they're stupid.
But
But
this is a good thing to bring up, that if you're thinking about hiring a calibrator, this is a good question to ask.
yeah,
This is something you want to ask them before you hire them, before you sign any contract or pay them any money. Say, hey, do you do a touch-up? Will you come back once or twice if I'm not happy with the results? I mean, that's a good thing to ask them. And if they say, nope, I will never do that because I'm too busy and screw you, then say, all right, I will hire somebody else. So
thank you very much for your estimate.
yeah.
I estimate that I will not be paying you any money. And on the idea, the topic of touch-ups, Gary's calibrator was also looking at his projector, his front projector,
Yeah.
and thought it could maybe use a quick tune-up calibration. Gary was wondering, do projectors really go out of calibration? I'm going to stop there because there's more to this question. I'll stop there. The answer to that is yes. Most projectors go out of calibration. When typical light bulbs, they reduce their output. Their output changes over time. It generally gets dimmer, but it also changes. So every year or half, I mean, at least, you want to do this at least when the bulb life has reached half. You want to do it. You definitely want to do a calibration then. So if
1,000 hours is typical.
Yeah, so if it's 6,000 hours, when you get to 3,000 hours, you should definitely have somebody do a calibration, or you should do it yourself. But most projector guys will do it once a year. We'll go in once a year and sort of go through the calibration process, just to compensate for the bulb dimming or the bulb changing over time. Got anything to add to that before we go on?
It's often the colors actually will shift too. In addition to it just getting dimmer overall, the colors can actually shift too, because most of them are these UHP, these ultra high pressure lamps, and typically it's red. Usually red gets reduced as the lamp ages, so you're not getting as much red output as you're supposed to. That's the most common problem in most projectors. But go. But his projector uses an LED light source, not a regular ultra high performance or ultra high pressure lamp like what Rob was just talking about. So he thinks it's odd that his particular projector might need a tune-up. I think it's odd too, because yours doesn't. Okay, LEDs have two modes of operation: on and dead. Okay, there's no. If it's working, it hasn't changed color. It should not ever need a change. I mean, I'm not saying that you couldn't have it touched up, but I wouldn't do it before. I would think about doing it 1 year to 2 years after the calibration, and then if they went, oh, it looks pretty good, then I would never do it again. That would pretty much be it. If they give me some sort of, I would watch them. I'm like, oh, you didn't really change anything. Oh yeah, it's definitely a change. One click.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm going to pay you $1 a click.
So I think one of the things that's actually bugging Gary is that we've talked about the purpose of video calibration is that we have these industry standards, these industry-wide standards that every movie and TV show is being made with. Every monitor that's being used during the production of that movie or TV show is calibrated to the same standard, and we're recommending have your home display calibrated to that exact same standard so you're seeing exactly what was intended. The issue Gary's really having is he's got a Kuro, he's got this new flat panel, he's got his projector, and he's looking at them with his own eyes and saying, yes, they're very, very close, but the colors, particularly in the dim areas or maybe in the blue area or maybe a really bright green or something like that, the colors are not exactly the same. And aren't they supposed to be? Isn't that the point of calibration? They should all be exactly the same. Gary, this is the problem with consumer level equipment. When you look at the monitors that they're using in the production
You're going to make him spend more money. This man has already spent so much money on this home theater. Give him a break.
This isn't just for Gary. This is for everybody, right? You look at the reference monitors, right? And they're tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of them, right? These are not consumer-level monitors and displays that they're using on the production side. They're really, really expensive, really, really set at the factories to be exactly these industry standards. Consumer level equipment is always going to have some variation in it, and when you're talking about like an LCD screen or an OLED screen, it might not be possible to get it spot on. I mean, really, really spot on. It might just be a limitation of the display itself. And yeah, compared to your Kuro, or compared to your projector, it might not be exactly the same everywhere. And I mean, we haven't really mentioned that before. That's a good thing. We've only touted that calibration should get you the exact same looking image across all your screens because that's the industry standard.
Well, exact in a statistical term.
Right.
You know, as a statistical, plus or minus a little bit.
Plus or minus. Yeah, there's a delta. There's a delta of 3. Off is considered imperceptible. You're not really supposed to be able to see it.
When I was trained to do calibrations by the THX guys, Michael Chen and Greg, I can't remember his last name. Lowen or something like that. I think that's what it is. They talked about that. You'll get some display, and you'll adjust because you adjust the red and it knocks something else out of whack. So you adjust that, and that knocks the red back out. Adjust the blue, and that does this. And you keep filling with it until you get about as good as you can get. So you got as good as you can get, which means you have a calibrated display.
Yeah.
Is it perfect? No, but it's a ton better than it was, and that's what we're going for.
Yeah, the other big thing is contrast and light output, right? Yeah. The difference between black and peak white, from your Kuro to your LCD to your OLED to your projector, they all have different contrasts and different peak brightnesses, and our eye is way more sensitive to that than to any shift in color. So if you're looking at your Kuro and you're saying, all right, I know that's calibrated, that's the way it's supposed to look, and then you look at your LCD that just on its own, it can't get it as black. It can't help but shift the hue of the color a little bit when it's really dim. It just can't do it. It can get as close as the calibrator can get it, but it just can't do it. It's always going to be a little bit blue or purple or something. The OLED has 4 pixels in it, so who knows? It might be a little bit off. Your projector is way dimmer than any of them. So your eye is going to see a difference. Even if the colors technically all measure exactly the same, you're still going to perceive them as different because of the contrast and the brightness. So that's another factor that could be in there.
Yep.
Just stuff to mention.
Stuff to mention. All right. Nick. Jeez, I thought we were way further along on this thing.
No,
we're at 16 minutes. We are... I don't. What were we thinking? We were sure we were gonna get. I thought we should do the news first. That's how sure I was through all this.
Yeah.
All right. If you have questions for us, we're not complaining. Don't forget, you can email us at rob@avrant, Tom@avrant, website avrant.com, facebook.com/avrantpodcasts, and on Twitter at places. And let me thank the guys again. Michael, Steve M, and Stephen R, thank you for supporting the podcast a second time, because without you, we would not have a way to pay our bills, and that would be a problem for me, because I can't pay them. Nick, wanted to hear our thought. Oh, God. Nick wants to know about subwoofers. Now, every time I think we've talked enough about subwoofers, somebody comes up with something. Now, these are, okay, every once in a while, and I guess it's not every once, it seems constantly, there's like this sort of cycle of subwoofer manufacturers that are maybe not, garage guys or something. A lot of times they are. Maybe they're not just forum guys who decide to strike out on their own. And hey, that's how SVS started. That's how a lot of these places started. I'm not gonna diss them for being that. But every once in a while, there's like kind of the cycle of massive subwoofers that come out, and everybody gets all just, it plays down to 14 hertz. You could put out 116.
I want 5, man. I want
single digits. I'm looking for a 9. I don't even know to go by that. Anyway, so and people get all excited on the forums, like, oh, I'm gonna get 2. Oh, I got one, and it blew the doors off my house. It cracked all my windows. Oh, so awesome. All right, so Nick's got a couple of these. Our thought, okay, so Seaton, I went to their website, and it's nothing but a web page that directs you to a forum.
Yes.
Which is odd.
That's a big improvement, man, because that didn't used to exist. At least they have a splash page now. It used to only be a forum.
So how long have they been around? I haven't heard their name.
Years, man. Seaton has been around. This is Mark Seaton. He's a guy. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but he's, Seaton Sound has been around for many, many years now and has always had its fans.
Okay. Anyways, so he's got this new thing called the Submersive HP Plus, which is, do they come together? You have to buy them separately, right?
Yeah,
There's a master, which is just a subwoofer, right? It's not just a subwoofer. subwoofer. It's just
Well,
a
yeah. It's
big
a big subwoofer, but it
All
is a
right.
subwoofer.
It is a subwoofer, like any other. It's got an amp. It's got, this case, drivers, and
Yeah.
then but it's got something a little bit different. It's got an output, and that output can be used to drive a second subwoofer called a slave sub, and the slave has no amp, but has the drivers and everything else. So the amp and the first sub can power the second sub as well as the first sub. Okay, and both these subs are massive. So
Yeah.
the Seaton Submersive HP Plus, it has dual. That means two 15-inch drivers. Okay, and this is not the one with the passive radio, right? No.
No, that's
Okay,
below.
so two 15-inch drivers. Are these? There's one front mount and one
They're actually
bottom? Side
either
mount.
side.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're
Side
both
mounted.
firing out the sides in phase. So both drivers
Oh,
move
Jesus.
outwards and both
Great.
both drivers move inwards at the same time.
Creating a vacuum every time they push out between
A
them.
lot of pressure inside of that sealed cabinet.
Yeah, so it's the enclosure of this thing is 24.25 inches by 17.5 inches by 25.5 inches. That's a big box.
Over
not,
2 feet in 2 dimensions. Yeah.
Yes,
It's
it's a big box.
big.
So the amp it's got a 2,400 watt amp. That's the normal power with 4,000 watt peak, which means that's what it'll do for a second before it starts to.
A second,
smoke.
you'll be lucky, man.
Yeah, I was gonna, instantaneous
Fractions of a
power, a
second.
fraction of a second. So the second sub has, I guess, it's the same thing. It's got two 15-inch drivers as well, and it's all being powered from the first thing. So the price for this dual subwoofer setup, 4 15-inch drivers in all, ends up costing just under, with shipping, it's going to be over $4,000, right around $4,000. So are these a better deal than, say, dual SVS PB13 Ultras, which are, is that what you have? The PB13 Ultras?
I have PC 13 Ultras. I have the cylinder versions.
Cylinders. So those are the boxes.
Box versions are more expensive, mainly because SVS includes the shipping. And shipping gigantic, heavy boxes is more expensive than lighter weight
cylinders. And are these as gigantic as the...
The PB13 Ultra is nearly as big. It's not as wide. It's deeper, and it's not quite as tall. But, I mean, the PB13 Ultra is a big, big subwoofer. So it's a little bit smaller than one of these Seatons, but not.
And he wants to know, Nick wants to know if these compete performance-wise with JL Audio subwoofers for a way lower price. Well, I don't know. I didn't really see. I can't stand going to forums to shop for things. You're gonna have to tell me what the specs are on this thing because I couldn't figure it out. I wasn't.
Well, therein lies the big problem. Mark Seaton doesn't post any specs or measurements for the Subversive.
Somebody
does. Somebody does, but they're all in room. So I don't know how much that's worth to have in-room measurements. This is one of the big criticisms that people have of Seaton Sound, is that many reviewers have requested to get samples. The line that's always given is, we are already selling out of all the subwoofers that we make, so we don't have any left over to send out for a review. Okay. But it's been years and years and years and years, and you could never find one to send to a reviewer, or even have a reviewer pay to buy one and measure it. These measurements don't exist from any official reviewer. So that's one weird thing. Another weird thing is, doesn't even put in a -3 dB point. I mean, that should be part of your specs. Nope. Not on the forum, on the page, anywhere. So either Mark Seaton doesn't believe in specs, or the specs aren't as impressive as everyone believes they are, or he just doesn't care because he's selling out of everything he can make, which is a perfectly
I would never buy a sub. I would never buy one of these subs. I'm sorry, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. This is why. There's a number of reasons. It's going to run to the next thing, too. You do not need dual 15-inch sub drivers. You do not need that. You know how you know you would need that? Because your custom installer who was building the addition to your house that your home theater would have to be in order to be big enough to have 4 15-inch drivers in your home theater. I'm sorry, you don't need that much output. Okay. I have no idea how low these things play, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, they play down to 15 hertz.
Oh,
That's
there are the people who say they play down into the single digits in their room.
whatever.
In their room.
I won't believe that. I don't believe that. Anyways, maybe they do, but I don't believe that. So
Not that
let's
you
say
want
they
that
play
anyway.
down to 15 hertz. Okay, let's say they play down to 10. All right,
Yep.
let's say they play down to 10. I'll give you 10. I'll give you
Sure.
10 hertz. Okay, in your room, for much less money, you can get 2 subwoofers that will give you 17 or 16 hertz for much less money in a box that's reasonable, and it will play just as loud as you need to, as these other subs will be playing in your room. Do you know why? Because your room is not so big to need all the output that these 2 subs will give you. They will give you massive amounts of output, incredible amounts of output. You will not need it because you will calibrate your subwoofers to your speakers, to your room. You'll turn your volume knob up until it's the right thing, and that subwoofer will barely be playing. It'll just be on enough to create noise, and that's all these will need to fill your room with bass. So, do you need two dual 15-inch subwoofers? Unless you have a massive home theater, you do not. And in which case, these are probably an okay deal. But without specs, without measurements, without knowing what I was getting myself into, there's no chance I would spend $4,000 on these speakers. I'm sorry. It's not that I don't think they could do it. They probably can. They're probably fantastic. I have no clue. But if it were my money, I wouldn't be spending it. Not a chance.
I mean, I haven't heard them in my room. I haven't heard one of these Seton subs. I have no idea. I mean, the people who are saying they're absolutely in love with it, I don't doubt them. They are absolutely in love with it. Then there's the people who are absolutely in love with the $100 sub that they bought from Parts Express, and they think it's the best thing they've ever heard, and that nothing could ever sound better. So I don't know. I mean, the answer is I really don't know. But I do know they're gigantic. I know you can't return them if they're in any sort of custom finish. I know you have to pay shipping both ways to get them to you and send it back. I know those things. I know that for whatever reason, for the years and years and years they've been in business, they've never, ever had a professional review done of them. I know those things. All of these things make me go, they might be fantastic. Are they really going to sound way better than one that, I mean, we know that the SVS subs sound really good. We know the rhythmic subs, the HSU subs, all of those have professional reviews, have been around for years. All of those have measurements. We know those all sound really good. Is this going to sound like 10 times better? Is it the deal of the century? Does it sound as good as a JL Audio sub for thousands of dollars less? No. No. I will say no, it doesn't, because it's the laws of physics. There's only so much you can do.
You can't get more linear than linear, okay?
Yeah.
You can get lower, but and honestly, I think the JL Audio comparison is not apt because JL Audio subs are quite for this.
Well, except for the Gotham.
Well, the Gotham,
Gotham's just as big.
But they're generally smaller. They're what you're paying for with JL Audio is an incredibly overbuilt subwoofer that gives you tons of performance and tons of output, and is small considering what performance and output you're getting. Okay, that's not what you're getting with these Seton subs. You're getting a big old hunkin' sub. 2 big old hunkin' subs with tons of drivers doing all sorts of weirdness and God knows what else. Yeah, they might be great. Okay?
There are always the people who will say these are better, and the reason they say they're better is because they're underground. It's because they don't have any professional reviews. It's because they don't have.
That's crap.
No, but there are the people who will always claim that anything that is less well known is automatically better because you're smarter for having found them, because they're the secret that nobody knows about. I mean, SVS started that way too, but let's not forget they're a completely different company now. So
they're now in brick and mortar stores all over the place.
That's right.
I keep getting emails from them announcing what places they're in Maryland or Maine or Texas or something. So Gary Kubian said that he was going to try to get them in the brick and mortar stores, and he is doing it, dude.
No, so. I mean, I just want to address the part, because at some point, everybody goes through this phase in their home theater hobby life where they start reading the forums and they start finding these brands they've never heard about and haven't been mentioned very much on podcasts, and there are the people there who are the biggest fans of them in the world and say that they're so much better and such a better deal than all of the established brands. And that, I'm sorry to say, is just plain bunk, because there is only so much you can do. You can only play so loud, so linear, with so fast transient response, with so little distortion. There's only so far you can take it, and no one is doing something magical that's way better than these other established brands for way less money. Nobody's doing it. It just can't be done. So that's my take on it.
All right. On a similar vein, Nick also found a review of the Sulk Rhythmic 15 with dual 15-inch passive rate. Jesus. That's a big.
That is the actual name. There's no shortened name. That's the name of the thing.
The Sulk Rhythmic 15 with dual 15-inch passive radiators. It is a front firing. I looked at that.
It's down firing.
But they have two 15-inch drivers.
The active driver fires down. The one that actually has a magnet. And
there's no front firing. Okay. No all right, I misunderstood then. I thought there was I thought there was two actual drivers and two passive radiators. I was getting confused with the other one. So it's a down firing subwoofer, and it sits on these big metal feet, which should rattle very nicely. And then two passive radiators on the side. Okay, and what we've talked about with passive radiators, these look like drivers, except they are not. They have no motor structure. They have no magnets. They're just the cones, okay. And in some sort of, they actually, the pictures I saw, it looked like it wasn't even a cast basket. It was just like a stamped basket. It wasn't in that kind of a basket. And so they have one driver that's going in and out, but firing down. The other two basically act like a port, because when the driver pushes down, the two passive radiators suck in, and when the driver pushes in, the two passive radiators push out, and that creates more sound, and it reduces the pressure inside and everything else. So the Sulk sound uses Rhythmic's 15-inch driver and a 600-watt amp, but then builds their own ridiculously heavy, and you can see the pictures of it on their site. It is ridiculously heavy. I think it's 120 pounds, the box.
170, Tom. 170 pounds.
170 pounds. I thought I misread. And it's cross braced like all over the place.
Yeah, every way.
Yeah. And do we think that the alterations to Rhythmic's own sub design makes the increase in price worthwhile? For a standard black finish, the Rhythmic is about $1,350, while the Sulk is about $1,900, shipping extra for both. So what is the alterations that they do here? Is it just the bracing?
Way bigger, heavier cabinet, and the two passive radiators instead of ports. Because the Rhythmic version of this has ports.
My take on that is I don't necessarily, and there were in this review on it was a home theater shack. There were some measurements, and they were done in room. You could see where the room had a problem. There's this big hump at the end. I'm like, I don't know if that's your mic or where you put it or the room itself. It could be anything, but there's this hump at the end. When we post the links to this, you have to go check out. Just skim to the bottom if you don't read the whole thing, and look at the thing that looks like a frequency response graph, and it's got a nice little bump at the end. And if you turn that graph upside down and put that at 70 hertz, that's what what's this name's thing looks like, right? He's got that 70 hertz. Steve's graph looks like it's got that 70 hertz suck out. Anyway, so it's a fairly, as far as the graph goes, it's an in-room measurement. There are ways to do some decent in-room measurements, but this is not it. Of subwoofers, we generally take our subwoofers outside. That's why I do not do subwoofer reviews, and I always put a lot of caveats. But he put this massive subwoofer in a room that's about the size of my home theater, and there is no cause for that. He said that when the passive radiators hit the first time, when he really had it turned up loud, they popped off the grills on the sides. So
good job.
Right there, it would make me question some of the design decisions that Sulk has made and what they've done here. And okay, you would think. Now, I just want to throw this out here as a little tidbit of information. I was talking with Shane Rich over at RBH. I don't talk to him very often, but whenever we go to trade shows, I always run into him. I talk to him. Great guy, extremely knowledgeable. Okay, extremely knowledgeable about how to build stuff. And subwoofers, you always have to take into account what the resonant frequency of the box is.
Hmm.
And just by bracing it, you cannot change the fact that it still has everything resonates.
You just
Everything.
raised the resonant frequency is all you did by essentially creating smaller panels, because every time you put a brace in there, you've cut in half or however far along the brace is, you've changed essentially the dimension of the panel and made it smaller, which raises the resonant frequency.
It very well may be that Salk has totally improved this sub. I have no clue.
I don't
Okay,
know, man. That rhythmic one's already pretty darn good.
the rhythmic. We know the rhythmic. So this is the question: if you have a really good sub, and somebody comes along and says, "I'm going to change it, and that'll make it better," do you go? I mean, what's your my first reaction is, why are you trying to change something that's good? Why don't you make your own? If you can make a good one, make a good one, and then sell it in relation to this. I don't know. I making something heavy and big appeals to that same sort of mindset on the forums where all subs should be heavy and big. SVS, to a certain extent, HSU and Rhythmic, the other ones have kind of shown that they don't necessarily have to be huge. They can be huge, and sometimes they need to be huge.
They're all big. Most people would look at any of those subs and go, "Holy cow, that's a big sub."
Yeah. But the smaller SVSs aren't that bad, but
Sure,
you
yeah.
give up on. And once again, when you do something like this, where you got the two passive radiators and the big downfire and stuff, I mean, you're looking at a ton of output again, ton of output. Do you need a ton of output? I've got Ray texting me on who's got 4 15-inch subs in his home theater, and he's saying, yeah, you need that. Okay, Ray, you need that, but most people do not need that. In fact, I would venture to say that as much as I love bass, I don't need that. It's just not something that you need, because
Well, I mean, for subwoofers,
it doesn't really change the extension. All it does is change the output.
Yeah, for subwoofers is a good idea for uniformity. He doesn't need the 4 subwoofers all vertically stacked on top of each other to play loud enough to fill his theater. He's got one in each corner to get the uniformity of the bass. Yes, 4 subwoofers are great in that situation. It's not for the loudness.
You got to remember that if you look over SVS's history, and you can go back and see some of it, they used to have some truly massive subs, and they've gotten away from it, and for two reasons. One, they don't sell, and 2, they just are not needed.
Yeah, you can go to Power Sound Audio, which are actually the same guys who started SVS originally are the guys who have now started Power Sound Audio, and they're doing what they did before, gigantic subs for very, very reasonable prices.
Yeah,
so,
and I honestly, I think that if I were really on the market for a massive subwoofer that somebody else made, I would probably be looking there, because those guys, I mean, that's how they started, and that's how they've been doing stuff, and I'm sure they can do it.
But yeah, my take on this Rhythmic versus the Sulk one that is using Rhythmic's driver and amplifier, the only reason I would say to go for the Sulk one is because if you bought some custom-made Sulk speakers that have a very particular finish, which is something Sulk Sound does. They build custom speakers, you can get any finish you want, and if you want a subwoofer that matches perfectly in looks, then by all means, get this one from Sulk, because you can have a perfectly matching finish. If you don't care about the finish, pay less and get the Rhythmic. That's my take on it.
Wow, I don't think we've ever had a subwoofer discussion that involved us basically telling you not to buy stuff. That's weird. I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. All right, Nicholas, enjoyed our recent discussion of acoustic treatments, and he had some additional things to share. First, he would like to address the claims that fiberglass can be a health. We should address the claims that fiberglass can be a health hazard, and that cotton or cellulose-based insulation products are safer. Tom has... Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is something that comes up every time you mention fiberglass. Okay? The facts are that there has been no one other than people on forums and people talking about this sort of anecdotally really says that rigid fiberglass board is a problem. It does not give off fibers. This is not like spraying pink stuff, even the pink stuff, they don't really worry about you inhaling it. People have been working around that their entire lives, and they're not coming down with anything weird. Usually they use some sort of mask, but that's because they're working around it every day of their lives.
And because it's itchy. It's very, very itchy.
And that's what you're really worried about. That's it. That's that's the danger. Okay, there's a link I have that will show up at some point. Rob will post it someplace, which has a pretty good discussion of this. If people keep trying to bring it back to how it's dangerous, and if you really kind of just read into it, there's just like at one point somebody says, hey, you can look at all the different little cancer places, and nowhere is fiberglass mentioned, and somebody says, well, that's because America sucks. Seriously, that was the response. America sucks. You guys are all gonna die. And somebody from Iceland, I think it was Iceland, chimes in. It's like, hey, we don't suck, and our health rules are much more strict than your guys' are over there, and we don't think that fiberglass is a problem either. So, if you look at my DIY guide, okay, because back then I was kind of buying into this whole thing, and I looked it up then, and then back then I said, hey, it doesn't really seem like this is a problem, but if you're worried about it, take some cotton batting, which is really cheap, and just cover the fiberglass in that. It's completely porous. It's really not going to do much. But the fact that you've got it hung on your wall and you've got a sheet of grill fabric or something over it, the little fibers are not going to come crawling their ways out and into your lungs and kill you.
Fiberglass is not asbestos.
It's just not going to be a problem. Okay. Now, if you're worried about it, get something else. I don't care what you do.
Yeah, all of the places we recommend, they also offer, they usually call it the eco option, ecos, something like that, and it will either be a cotton or a cellulose-based product. It costs a little bit extra. If you're worried about it, get that. If you're building your own, and the places that sell the raw materials also sell these eco options. So, yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a concern. I wouldn't worry about it. I've had it in my house. I have it in my house currently. It's just not an issue. But maybe I don't know. Maybe we'll drop to the cancer tomorrow, and you'll laugh over my grave and go, ha ha ha! Fiberglass killed you.
Maybe don't make your bed out of it and sleep face down in it. I mean, you'll wake up with a rash if nothing else.
Yes. All right. So there's Nicholas also provided us with some graphs with some examples of various materials showing their acoustic absorption over a range of frequencies. All of them start to dive below 400 hertz, which is pretty much true. Mm-hmm. But some are better than others. So I guess, are we going to post that someplace? I guess.
Yeah. I'll just pop up. I mean, it's just a graph, so folks can look at it.
And he also ended up talking with Glenn over at GIC Acoustics. The full measurements for all their panels are quote-unquote in the works, but not yet posted. So Nicholas thinks we should maybe hold off and recommend them until third-party measurement data is in. I don't agree with this, but I know Rob's got something specific to say about it. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to mention there's another site that I've mentioned before called Acoustimac. Acoustimac has had all of their panels independently tested by a place called the Riverbank Acoustical Laboratories, and they also list NRCR there. That's the National Research Council of Canada. So I don't know if they used their anechoic chamber probably to do the testing in. I imagine that's where the NRC comes into it. But the point is, Acoustimac uses all the same materials that GIC does. So if you want to get a rough idea of what GIC's panels are like, because they're not identical, GIC incorporates a little bit of an air gap into all of their absorption panels that Acoustimac does not. But just for a rough idea, you could look at Acoustimac's measurements. It'll be somewhat similar, and as we noted, all of these materials that Nicholas pointed us to, there are some differences, but they're all pretty similar in how they perform at various frequencies. So yes, maybe if you're really technical and worried about a specific frequency, maybe you want to see the measurements first. But honestly, the GIC products work like all the other fiberglass products do.
It's really,
they're not doing
like
anything
I said last week.
So.
Fiberglass is fiberglass. Fiberglass is fiberglass. Yes, they might have some slight differences, but I wouldn't worry about it. And Nicholas also highly recommends the Master Handbook of Acoustics, which is something we have not talked about in this podcast. I don't know that I ever have, but I think it must have come up at some point. But the Master Handbook of Acoustics is the Bible for acoustics. It's been around for a long time. I guess the 6th edition is about to come out. You can
Yeah.
pre-order that at Amazon, and I don't think it's cheap, and I think that's why I've
It's
never.
like $30.
Yeah, that's why I've never
Yeah.
bought it. It's just whatever.
Yeah, the
But
fifth edition is available in all formats, ebook formats, and all that. So
yeah,
if you want the
and
fifth
Nicholas
edition,
highly recommends it for not just because it's a great resource, but because it's not written like a textbook. It's very easy to understand. They try to keep it at a level that it's that's at least what he says, if I remember his email right. So try to keep it at a level that you'll be able to kind of follow along. So that's something to think about. So thank you, Nicholas, for your email. We appreciate it. Yes, I agree with the Master Handbook thing. Paul wanted to hear our thoughts on what we think an upgraded name brand stereo car audio system offered by car manufacturers in their higher trim levels are worth it. Do they really offer better sound over the stock audio systems? I have to say, whenever I've shopped for cars, which has been so very rarely, stereo unfortunately kind of ranks up there with things I care about the most about. I mean, I know I should care more about gas mileage or how many people can fit in it, and I do care about those things. But when I'm looking at two cars that are, anywhere near each other as far as, and even if one car is not quite as nice as the other one, if the stereo's better, I'm like, I don't want the good stereo. Because I have to sit in that car all the time and listen to stuff. I hate listening to stuff that doesn't sound good. Go on.
all right. My take is sometimes yes. I mean, when I was shopping for cars, I mean, the thing is, if you're really worried about it, you should be able to hear these at the dealership for yourself. I mean, they should have one on display on their showroom floor that has the stock system and one that has the upgraded system. That would be something they ought to have at the dealership. If not, maybe drive a little farther and find one who does. But I mean, yeah, in my experience, yeah, some of them do. Some of them sound different, but not necessarily all that much better. If you really, really care about the audio in your car, I would suggest not paying for the upgrade that comes from the manufacturer and just getting a proper car audio system installed from a third-party vendor if you really, really care about it, because none of the upgraded ones sound as good as it possibly could. There are definitely better car audio systems available, but you won't get it from the manufacturer pre-installed. So, I mean, if you're in that middle ground,
I would make the case that maybe some of them, like the Bang & Olufsen stuff, that's actually made with DVDAs and SACDs in mind.
Right,
there's a couple of different systems. Like I think Acura had some systems like that. I don't know, they weren't Bang & Olufsen, they were something else, but they may have been JBL. But they that were actually made with 5.1 in mind in the car. Those are pretty rare, though. Most of these things, you're just going to get a subwoofer shoved into a wheel well someplace, and maybe some slightly better tweeters or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, I agree, they will make a difference. Whether or not it will not sound as good as it could, I am unconvinced that these people that install systems in cars have any idea what. If the TV is any indication of what they think good sound is, God help us. If there must be somebody out there that really does it right. I'm sure that that they install audio systems, but throwing 4 10-inch subwoofers in the back of a car with some glowing amps does not inspire confidence in me. I will say that Clint got for that there was a review, a video review. I don't know if it's posted yet over at Audioholics, that he did of a couple of Pioneer in-dash systems, and he has always complained about the sound in his car, and he got one of them installed in his car. And I don't know if they replaced all the speakers, but they definitely added like a tweeter, which was like mounted on. I don't know if it's like on the side of the dash right next to the door, if it was actually on the door, but it was real close to that area.
It's probably like a killer or something like that.
Yeah, and it swivels, right? So they angled it or whatever, and I think they locked it down afterwards. But he was amazed at how much better. He's always complained about how bad it was. It doesn't take a lot because your car, the noise floor in there is huge. So you really are looking for a certain level of intelligibility, and then past that, everything is gravy. And that's he was pretty amazed at how much better it sounded. So can it sound better, Paul? Yes. Will it sound better? I think it probably will. I mean, the name brand stuff, I think it's probably going to sound better. Will it sound as good as it can? I agree with Rob. I think you're going to have to go outside for that. But the fact of the matter is most of the time, I mean, most of the time, I've bought one new car my whole life. That one new car, when the upgraded stereo system, it wasn't an upgraded stereo. It was this, and an upgraded stereo. It was a package, and all I had to do was convince my wife that any other part of that package was important, and we got an upgraded stereo system. No, that worked for me. All right, Michael. I don't know who this is. Anyways, one of the bit more which Michael this is.
This is our regular Michael.
We have a regular Michael?
Regular Michael always writes to us.
Okay. Hi, regular Michael. Is that going to be his name in parentheses from now on? Let's make him regular Michael. Infinite Gary, regular Michael. So he's like unleaded Michael. One, a little more explanation about what cascading crossovers are. We mentioned them last week, and he tried having the crossover in his AV receiver set to 80 hertz, and then also setting the crossover knob on his subwoofer to 80 hertz too. When he did that, it almost completely got rid of any voice sounds coming from his subwoofer. Okay, he was one of the ones that was talking about voices coming from the sub. Get out. Is that what we're talking about? Yes, that is what we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about. You now have cascading crossovers. Okay, as you can see, the sounds that you were hearing that were kind of overlapping, which are these voices that were coming from your sub, easily identifiable by you as being something that shouldn't be coming from your sub, but then now we're playing play by your sub because the crossover above 80 hertz was reaching far enough that you were hearing these voices. You have both crossovers operating at the same time, so it's bringing all of those frequencies down quicker than they should be being brought down. Therefore, those voices are now not as loud as they should be. Also, also not as loud as they should be. All the other sounds that are supposed to be around that crossover on both sides of 80 hertz.
Yeah, so the crossover is a pair of filters on your speakers. There is a high pass filter. Again, insert the word can. So high can pass, low cannot pass, or gets quieter and quieter on the speaker side. And then on the subwoofer side, there is the low pass filter. Low can pass, highs get quieter and quieter. So your AV receiver, when you set the crossover to 80 hertz, is applying a filter that starts a little bit lower than 80 hertz, maybe 75 hertz, and it's on your subwoofer, and it starts to get quieter and quieter as the frequencies get higher and higher, and that might be, the typical is 24 decibels every octave. So up at 160 hertz, it should be about 24 decibels quieter. Still audible, but just a lot quieter. When you also set the crossover knob on the subwoofer itself, it just applied a second 24 decibel per octave filter on top of the one that was already there. And yes, you can just add those together. If you're choosing the same frequency for the crossover, you just created a 48 decibel per octave filter. It is a much, much steeper filter, and now at 160 hertz, it is 48 decibels quieter instead of only 24, which is why you just made the slope way, way steeper. It's almost like the brick wall filter where nothing plays above it. It's just a way steeper. It's getting quicker, it's getting quieter more quickly as the frequency gets higher, and that is a cascading crossover.
So if you were to, theoretically, if you were to, all things being equal, and if everything was flat before you did this, you would, if you measured everything beforehand, you would have a straight line, basically a straight line across that 80 hertz range, plus or minus, you'd have it basically straight. Now you would see a dip, basically. There would be some sort of weird dip before and after it. I think the 80 hertz the 80 hertz should be okay. Is that right? It would be
the idea is that the speakers will be 3 decibels quieter at 80 hertz.
Yeah,
and the subwoofer will also be 3 decibels quieter at 80 hertz. So it's a little bit above 80 that it starts to roll off on the speakers, and a little bit below 80 that it starts to roll off on the subwoofer, so that both 80s are 3 decibels quieter. And the idea is, since your speakers are in a different location than your subwoofer, when you add the outputs of those two together, it should get you back to 0. So that's why they're both 3 decibels quieter at 80.
So don't do this. I mean, you can do it, but stop it. But he doesn't like having the do we know that he's crossing things over at 80? He did say 80, didn't he?
He mentioned 80 specifically, So.
It's weird that he's hearing that much sound come out of a sub, though.
Well, I
find
think
that
he
to be
mentioned
odd.
he's only like 2 feet away from his sub, so he's actually able to hear a little bit of that. The low end of the
Right.
voices that are maybe 160 hertz, with
Yeah.
them only being 24 decibels quieter and him being only 2 feet away from his sub, he can sort of locate where
Yeah.
that's coming from. Which, I can understand that.
It's possible. Definitely possible. All right. Yay, we're on the news. Apple's buying Beats. We talked about that already.
Love to go super fast.
Netflix is going to increase their price. I got an email about it
They already
already.
did
They're
it.
going to $8.99 a month. I am grandfathered in for the next 2 years at $7.99 a month, which
As am I. I
yeah,
hope everyone else is too. Otherwise, you're paying a whole dollar more. Oh no.
everybody give a round of applause to Abby, who's now gotten another season of Orange is the New Black. Abby's our listener, asked a question earlier, and she is an actress on that show, as long as other stuff. Yay, Abby. Thank you.
Season 2 starts June 6th, so the third season has already been picked up before the second season even airs.
See, the thing was, I could have swore I heard someplace that Orange is the New Black I think the second season was going to start showing on Netflix. I think I must have heard that Netflix was going to start filming it. I just misunderstood. Netflix, what? Network TV upfronts? What does that
That's
mean?
the stuff I talked about at the top of the show. It's all the shows that are being canceled or renewed, or the new shows that are being picked up, like Gotham over at Fox. They put that to series.
Yeah,
Constantine on NBC, that's going to series.
I think Constantine would be a good show if they did it right. That
Yeah,
doesn't really sounds
be.
more like an HBO show. I used to collect the comic book back in the day. Hellblazer is the name of the comic book, but I used to love it.
Agent Peggy Carter, that's coming to
I'm
ABC.
excited about that.
It's going to be good.
I don't know.
Haley Atwell, she's awesome. Anything to get more of her on TV.
I thought that when are we going to get these Netflix superhero shows? When's that coming? I want that.
That's 2015. Those are still.
I'm waiting for 2015. Hurry up, produce something already. OLED is Samsung and Sony are slowing their production for a bit.
Well, yeah, Sony's suspending theirs, and Samsung is not building the plant that they said they were going to build to produce gigantic OLEDs. So it might be LG is the only one who's still doing it.
Yeah.
Disappointing news.
We'll see how that shakes out. That may be that they're finding that they're getting a lot of returns, or maybe somebody said, "Stop curving these things because that's stupid."
We can hope.
Microsoft is dropping the price of the Xbox One to $400 by drop kicking the Kinect off of that thing. So
Yep.
Rob will be one of the only ones with the Kinect left after this.
Yeah, that's happening June 9th. Yeah. So
the
apparently,
exciting thing, though, is that you won't need Xbox Live anymore to access Netflix, which will really help a friend of mine out. He'll be very excited about that. If he listens to this podcast, he would know too, because I'll forget to tell him.
yeah, for a long time, their Xbox Live was necessary to do any of the streaming programs on Xbox 360 or Xbox One. So they are nixing that. This is all, I am certain of it, even though they deny it, in response to the fact that Sony has sold through at this point more than 7 million PS4s. The Xbox One has shipped somewhere around 5 million, but not necessarily sold those through to actual customers. They don't like that trend. They don't like that they released Titanfall and still got beaten by the PlayStation 4 that month, even though the PlayStation 4 has, like, no games. For whatever reason, everybody's still buying the console, so they're like, maybe we should make it the same price, get rid of the camera that no one wanted in the first place, and stop charging people for stuff that they don't have to pay for anywhere
I still
else.
think this is going to be the last console that we see. We're never going to see another console after this.
Yeah, just become streaming. Yeah.
I really don't think. I don't ever see us having another console like this. I'm sorry, I just don't. Maybe we will. I don't know. Maybe we will. All right. So that's it. We're done.
We did it.
We did it. We got to the end.
And you can tell how much we care about Apple buying Beats by how much we talked about it. I'll just say, if there's any Beats branding on the next iPhone, I ain't buying it. It's the reason I didn't buy an HTC One, because they had the stupid Beats logo on it. So that's my take on it.
They are totally going to have a Beats logo on there.
I know they are, and I won't buy it. I'll go elsewhere.
That's right. They're going to have a. It's going to have a curve. They have a curve on their to make it bassier. Everybody's going to sound like Darth Vader. What's his name? Oh man, I'm blanking
What,
out.
James Earl Jones?
James Earl Jones. Could sound like James Earl Jones coming out of that thing. It'd be awesome.
No, James Earl Jones sounds good. Everything Beats does sounds bad, so it won't.
I just was listening to some guys on the radio today talk about how they were going to buy some Beats headphones, and I'm like, you're radio guys. You should know better. You have headphones on all the time. You should know better.
Well, I mean, hey, Apple already hates your ears, judging by the earbuds that they've packed in with every iPod and iPhone since the beginning of time. So they already hate your ears. Why not hate them more for even more money? Makes total sense.
You make a good point, sir. All right, that's going to be it for this week. So
Yep,
thanks everybody for listening. I did all the contact information a bunch of times.
you did.
So anything
Quick
else?
recommendation.
Go on.
From Toby, I'm just taking Toby's recommendation. He wanted to recommend checking out Andrew Robinson's YouTube channel, particularly his Home Cinema Experience series of tutorials. I've looked at most of those. I agree with almost everything Andrew Robinson says. So if you want to see a lot of the same information that we've been espousing for years in a slightly different format, in video format, I have no problem with everyone watching Andrew Robinson's
It's a
videos.
Rob
They are
approved.
good. Yep, they're
That's all I had
good.
to think about that. Rob approved. All right, for AB Rant, I'm Tom Mantry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
And we'll have the hangout after party in about 5 minutes or so, guys. All right? As soon as
I can't believe it. We did it.
I know.